Hi, my name is Subhashini. I'm from BBA. Okay, let's move on. Introduction. Perception is the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the environment. Learning involves understanding, relating ideas, and making connection between previous and new knowledge. Independent and critical thinking and ability to transfer knowledge to new. What is perception? A process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impression in order to give meaning to their environment. While our sensory receptors are constantly collecting information from the environment, it is ultimately how we interpret that information that affects how we interact with the world. Then, people behavior is based on their perception of what reality is, not on reality itself. The world as it is perceived is the world that is behaviorally important.
Hello guys, my name is Yamunan and firstly I'm going to talk about understanding the process of perception. There are four stages a perceptual process consists, which is attention, organization, interpretation and retrieval. First is the attention process. As most individuals do not perceive reality, understanding the perception process is crucial. Instead, we tend to see reality through the lens of our interpretations and behave accordingly. We are constantly bombarded with information which may be overwhelming at times. As a result, we only focus on the targets or items that attract our eye. For the organization process, we organize the data into identifiable patterns that give us meaning. Keeping things in order or say in a synchronized way is organizing. In order to make sense of data received, it is important to organize them. Next, we have the process of interpreting, which means forming an idea about a particular object depending upon the need or interest. Interpretation means that information we have sensed and organized is finally giving a meaning by turning it into something that can be categorized. It includes stereotyping, halo effect, and many more. The information is then interpreted and stored in our memory. The information is eventually recovered in order to attach meaning to it by developing a comprehension of data. Next, I'm gonna talk about managing perceptual distortions. People always judge each other regardless of the context, and the findings of their judgment are extensively employed in a variety of scenarios, ranging from assessing a risk for commercial purposes to assessing the same for work or life-related concerns. Managers and supervisors in the workplace must guarantee that all choices are based on facts rather than perception. Otherwise, job performances, employees' motivation, the organization's production and profitability, and employee relationships would be disrupted. Perception may be prevented if one is well informed and seeks knowledge from a variety of sources. One should also exercise empathy and assist in the correction of any incorrect perception that come to their attention, as well as prevent taking shortcuts while making judgments and assigning meaning. As a result, it's crucial to learn how to control the perception progress and eliminate prejudice. Perception can be prevented in many ways. Furthermore, avoiding common perceptual distortions is also another example for preventing perceptions. Individuals must avoid typical perceptual distortions such as stereotype beliefs, forming judgments, making decisions based on halo effect features, selectively consuming information based solely on what they are interested in, and comparing one person to another. Lastly, is helping to rectify incorrect perceptions. Let's assume your subordinate got promoted to the position of a branch manager in Johannesburg, South Africa, as a result of his exceptional performance in the previous quarter. His wife and children, on the other hand, will remain in Malaysia until the next year's vacation, as he is leaving for Johannesburg in October. Other colleagues begin to assume that he is divorcing his wife as a result of this circumstance. Because you are aware of any type of situation, it is your job to put an end to unfounded rumors and advise rumor mongers to concentrate on work rather than non-productive and non-business related things. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Yamni Ajay Shankar. Today I am going to explain about two elements from topic 4, which is factors influencing perception and perceptual distortion. Let's move to the slide. Next slide is about factors influencing perception, which influence a person's perception, include the perceiver, the target or object, and the situation which is being perceived. Firstly is perceiver. perceiver defined as an individual who form the perception in question. Each individual is unique in the terms of the characteristic which it helps to lead to different interpretations and meanings when different individuals. Among the characteristics that will influence an individual perception are past experience, motivation levels, motivation drives, attitude, interest, expectation, and mood. Sometimes there are other factors which determine a person's success, such as intelligence, integrity, and more. So the next is target or object. A target or object refers to the item which a perceiver sees and the characteristic of the target or object which affect the perception towards it. Sometimes the targets and their background will influence us in the perception process. Other characteristics that affect perceptions are motion, sound, background, as well as similarity of the targets. The last factor influencing perception is situations. The situation could be the next context which we see the target or object or experience in the event. The perceiver and the target or object remain the same, but the difference in situation of the target or subject which changes in the perception which will creating a whole different meaning. I explain it one by one. Firstly is stereotype, or it can call as a prototype, which can define as an assumption that all members of a specific group behave in a similar way as they have the same characteristic. Sometimes these assumptions are generalizations as help us to make decisions quickly. Example of a common stereotype are age, ability, gender, ethnic, and more. So the next is halo effects. Halo effects is the tendency to draw a general impressions based on a single characteristic. This is because the one of the characteristics overshadows the other characteristics. Among other common characteristics that influence these shortcuts are persons such as intelligence, appearance, and skills. So the third common perception distortion is selective perceptions. So selective perceptions means the situation when people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interests, background, experience, and attitudes. So the selective perception is a tendency to focus on certain aspects while ignoring others. It means any characteristic that make a person, object, or event stand out will increase the probability that it will be perceived, because it is impossible for us to estimate everything we see. Only certain stimuli can be taken in. Projection is a shortcut, which is a tendency for people to perceive others who are similar to themselves favorably as compared to individuals who are less similar. This will apply to a similar in work values as well as a demographic variables, for example age, gender, and race. The next is contrast effect, which is a scenario where we tend to evaluate and compare one situation or even to another similar situation or event that has happened before. This situation or event being used for a comparisons could be either better or worse compared to the situation or even being evaluated. Last but not least is first impressions error, which is tendency for people to judge other based on their initial judgments of the individuals. This error also known as a primary effect error. For example, an interviewer's first impression of the candidate in a job interviews is session play a very significant role in the interviews. This error should be avoided by supervisor and manager, which being overshadows instead by the first impression formed earlier on by the overall performance. So these are all the common perceptual distortions which giving meaning to the events or things around us. These shortcuts hinder us from making and giving the correct meaning to the situation while creating perceptual distortions. Thank you.
Good day people, I am Nila Pushpanathan from BBA. So now let's move into attribution theory. Attribution theory is a concern with how ordinary people explain the cause of behavior and events. At the same time, we may attempt determine whether an individual behavior is internally or externally caused. Kelly is the person of the founder this theory named Kelly attribution theory. He states that behavior may be caused by dispositional factor or maybe situational factor. Dispositional factor is a behavior that determined by personal traits. For an example, a person may look at someone and asking for money on the street and tell themselves that the person is just lazy. This is called dispositional factor. Second was situational factor. Situational factor says that the process of assigning the cause of behavior to some situation or event outside a personal control rather than to some internally characteristic. For an example, suppose a student fails in an exam, her parents assume that the question was difficult or maybe they blame their teachers. This is what we call situational factor. As the people, they always look for three main factors: consciousness, distinctiveness, and the consistency. Consciousness and the distinctiveness bring the same definitions, says that the extent to which other people behave in the same way in a similar situation. But consistency says that this factor brings different factor than the extent to which the person behave like the every time this situation occurs. So now let's move into Pygmalion effect, called as self-fulfilling prophecy. So this is the chain how Pygmalion effect works in our daily life. For a crystal clear explanation, let's move into a short video.
Let's look at an example and start with your beliefs. Imagine you are the coach of a basketball team, and you observe your team on the first day. Chris and Joe are new members of your team. Chris reminds you of a famous player. Joe reminds you of an annoying boy from your high school years. Unconsciously, you decide what to expect of each one of them. Your beliefs influence your actions. When Chris enters the court, you're happy to see him. When he plays, you push him to do better, practice harder, stay an extra hour. If he makes a mistake, you explain to him how to improve. When Joe comes in, you hardly notice him. You're glad to see him score, but you don't give him much feedback and don't invest extra time in his training. When Joe does a mistake, you are a little annoyed. Your actions impact their beliefs about themselves. Chris feels you appreciate him, and he appreciates you in return. He believes in his own success. Joe feels you have little patience and appreciation for him. He does not believe in his own success. Their beliefs about themselves causes their actions toward you. Chris finds more and more joy in playing, and he never misses a training session. During the games, he gives 100% all the time. Joe finds less joy in playing than before and doesn't give his full effort in the games. He starts to miss the training sessions sometimes, which reinforces your beliefs about them. You see how Chris enjoys playing, how he trains hard and shows a fast increase in his performance. Joe seems not to be very motivated. His skills don't increase as much, and he starts to show up less. You knew it right away. Thank God your instincts were right.
So from that video, we knew that how Pygmalion effect works in our daily life. Thank you.
Learning can be defined as the permanent change in behavior due to direct and indirect experience. It means change in behavior, attitude due to education and training, practice and experience. Based upon some key factors that decide what changes will be caused by this experience. Motivation, the encouragement, the support one gets to complete a task to achieve a goal is known as motivation. Practice, we all know that practice makes us perfect. In order to be a perfectionist or at least complete the task, it is very important to practice what we have learned. Environment, we learn from our surroundings, we learn from the people around us. There are two types of environment, internal and external. Mental group. It describes our thinking by the group of people we choose to hang out with. In simple words, we make a group of those people with whom we connected. It can be for a social cause where people with the same mentality work in the same direction. Learning can be understood clearly with the help of some theories that will explain our behavior. There are four theories, which is classical conditioning theory, operant conditioning theory, social learning theory, cognitive learning theory. Social learning theory. Learning is not exactly behavioral. Instead, it is a cognitive process that takes place in social contexts. Learning can occur by observing a behavior and by observing the outcomes of the behavior. Learning includes observation, extraction of information from those observations and making decisions regarding the performance of the behavior, known as observational learning or modeling. Cognition defines a person's ideas, thoughts, knowledge, interpretations, understanding about himself and environment. This theory considers learning as the outcome of deliberate thinking on a problem or situation based upon known facts and responding in an objective and more oriented manner. It perceives that a person learns the meaning of various objects and events and also learns the response depending upon the meaning assigned to the stimuli. Schedules of reinforcement. A schedule of reinforcement is basically a rule stating which instance of behavior will be reinforced. In some cases, a behavior might be reinforced every time it occurs. Sometimes a behavior might not be reinforced at all. Either positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement may be used as a part of operant conditioning. In both cases, the goal of reinforcement is to strengthen a behavior so that it will likely occur again. Continuous reinforcement. In continuous reinforcement, the desired behavior is reinforced every single time it occurs. This schedule is best used during the initial stages of learning to create a strong association between the behavior and response. For example, that you are trying to teach a dog to shake your hand. During the initial stages of learning, you will stick to a continuous reinforcement schedule to teach and establish the behavior. In partial reinforcement, the response is reinforced only part of the time. Learned behavior are acquired more slowly with partial reinforcement, but the response is more resistant to extinction. Think of the earlier example in which you were training a dog to shake hand. While you initially use continuous reinforcement, reinforcing the behavior every time is simply unrealistic. In time, you will switch to a partial schedule to provide additional reinforcement once the behavior has been established or after considerable time has passed. There are four schedules of partial reinforcement. Fixed ratio schedules are those in which a response is reinforced only after a specific number of responses. This schedule produces a high, steady rate of responding with only a brief pause after the delivery of the reinforcer. Second, variable ratio. Variable ratio schedules occurs when a response is reinforced after an unpredictable number of responses. This schedule creates a high, steady rate of responding. Gambling and lottery games are good examples of a reward based on a variable ratio schedule. Fixed interval schedules are those where the first response is rewarded only after a specified amount of time has elapsed. This schedule causes high amounts of responding near the end of the interval but slower responding immediately after the delivery of the reinforcer. Finally, variable interval. Variable interval schedules occurs when a response is rewarded after an unpredictable amount of time has passed. This schedule produces a slow, steady rate of response. Using the appropriate schedule, deciding when to reinforce a behavior can depend on a number of factors. In cases where you are specifically trying to teach a new behavior, a continuous schedule is often a good choice. Once the behavior has been learned, switching to a partial schedule is often preferable. Thank you for listening.